The flutter of a candle's flame through a cracked cabin window stopped Nathan Zimmerman dead in his tracks, and what he saw through that narrow gap changed everything he thought he knew about solitude. He had been returning from his trapline that November evening in 1872, his shoulders heavy with beaver pelts and the weight of another silent day in the mountains above Lewiston, Idaho. The cabin sat tucked against the hillside, barely visible through the ponderosa pines, and Nathan had passed it 100 times without giving it much thought. Old Morrison's place, abandoned since the former trapper died 2 winters back, or so he had believed. But there she was, hunched over a wooden table, her face illuminated by the stuttering light of a single candle stub. Even from 15 yards away, Nathan could see the way she held herself close to that failing flame, her eyes tracking across the pages of a book with desperate intensity, as though the words might vanish if she did not consume them quickly enough. Her dark hair fell forward, obscuring half her face, and she brushed it back with an absent gesture that spoke of hours spent in exactly that position. Nathan stood frozen in the gathering dusk, aware he was intruding on something private, something almost sacred. The woman read like other people breathed, necessary and unconscious. Then the candle guttered, nearly dying, and he watched her shoulders sag. She tilted the book toward the feeble light, squinting, her body curved into an uncomfortable angle just to catch the last rays. He should have walked on. He had lived 7 years in these mountains precisely because he preferred his own company, because civilization and its complications had proven too much after the war. But something about that scene, about the fierce hunger for words and light, pulled at a part of him he thought had died at Shiloh. Nathan continued home to his own cabin another mile up the mountain, but his mind stayed in that window. He ate his supper without tasting it, staring at the oil lamp that burned cheerfully on his own table. He had 2 such lamps, both good quality, bought in a moment of extravagance from a merchant in Lewiston. He also had books, not many, but more than most men in these parts. A volume of Shakespeare's plays, 3 novels by Cooper, a collection of Emerson's essays, and a Bible his mother had pressed into his hands before he went to war. They sat on a shelf gathering dust because Nathan had discovered that words on a page made him think, and thinking led to remembering, and remembering was something he had come to these mountains to escape. But that woman and her failing candle haunted him through the night. When dawn broke cold and clear, Nathan found himself pulling the oil lamp down from his shelf, along with all 5 books. He wrapped them carefully in oilcloth, tucked the bundle under his arm, and headed down the mountain before he could talk himself out of it. Morrison's cabin looked even more dilapidated in the morning light. The porch sagged, several roof shingles were missing, and the whole structure listed slightly to the left as though weary of standing. Smoke rose from the chimney, thin and hesitant. Nathan approached slowly, aware that a lone woman in these mountains had every reason to be cautious of a stranger. He was 10 feet from the door when it swung open, and she stepped out, a rifle leveled at his chest. "That is far enough," she said. Her voice was steady, but Nathan could see the slight tremor in her hands. She was younger than he had guessed from the window, perhaps 22 or 23, with a face that would have been pretty if not for the hollow circles under her eyes and the sharp angles of hunger in her cheeks. Her dress was patched and faded, but clean. Her dark eyes were huge and wary. Nathan slowly raised his free hand, keeping the wrapped bundle visible. "I mean no harm, miss. I just brought you something. I do not want anything from you. Leave." "I saw you reading last night," Nathan said, keeping his voice gentle. "Your candle was almost gone. I thought you might use a lamp." Something flickered in her expression. Surprise followed quickly by suspicion. "You were watching me?" "I was passing by. Your cabin is on the way to my trap line." He carefully knelt and set the bundle on the ground. "I will just leave these here and be on my way." "Why?" The rifle did not waver, but her voice held genuine confusion now. "Why would you do that?" Nathan considered the question. "Why indeed?" "Because I know what it is to want something you cannot have," he said finally, "and because nobody should have to strain their eyes like that just to read." He stood slowly, keeping his movements deliberate and non-threatening. For a long moment they simply looked at each other across the weedy yard. Up close, Nathan could see that her dress had been expensive once, the kind of garment a woman wore in a city parlor. What was she doing alone in an abandoned cabin in the Idaho mountains? "What is your name?" she asked suddenly. "Nathan Zimmerman. I have a cabin about a mile up the mountain. Been there near 7 years now." "Winnie Matthews." She said it like a confession, and Nathan heard the weight of some story behind those two simple words. "I have been here 3 weeks." "Alone?" Her chin lifted. "Yes." It was none of his business. Nathan knew that. The whole point of living in the mountains was that you did not ask questions, and nobody asked them of you. But 3 weeks in a falling-down cabin with nothing but a candle stub, and her looking half-starved. "Well, Miss Matthews, those are yours if you want them. No strings attached. I will be on my way now." He touched the brim of his hat and turned to leave. "Mr. Zimmerman." He looked back. She had lowered the rifle slightly, though she still held it ready. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for the lamp." Nathan nodded and headed back into the trees, feeling her eyes on him the whole way. He told himself that was the end of it, that he had done his good deed and could return to his solitary existence with a clear conscience. But as he checked his trap lines that day, his mind kept returning to Morrison's cabin and the woman inside it. Alone, hungry, defensive as a cornered animal. 3 days passed before he went back. This time, he brought a haunch of venison, freshly killed, wrapped in canvas. He also brought 2 more books that he had forgotten he owned, discovered in the bottom of an old trunk. He told himself he was just being neighborly, that anyone would do the same. The truth was that he could not shake the image of her bent over that book, her face alive with an intensity he had not seen in another human being in years. The rifle was slower to appear this time, and when Winnie opened the door, Nathan saw the oil lamp burning cheerfully on the table behind her. One of his books lay open beside it. "Mr. Zimmerman," she said. There was something different in her voice, wariness mixed with something that might have been hope. "You came back. Brought you some meat. Winter is coming, and this cabin does not look too weatherproof." He held out the wrapped venison. "I hunt more than I can eat anyway." This was not strictly true. Nathan was careful with his provisions, having learned through hard experience that mountain winters were unforgiving. But the lie came easily when he looked at the sharp angles of her face. Winnie stared at the bundle, then at him, her expression unreadable. "Why are you doing this?" "Already told you. Common decency." "Nobody in Lewiston showed me common decency," she said bitterly. "They made it very clear I was not welcome in their respectable town." There it was, the story behind her presence here. Nathan knew better than to ask for details, but Winnie seemed suddenly eager to talk, as though the words had been damming up inside her for weeks. "My father died in the spring," she said, her voice flat. "He was a doctor, respectable. We lived in a good house on the hill. But he left nothing but debts. The creditors took everything, including the house. I had no family, no way to support myself." She laughed, a harsh sound, without humor. "The good ladies of Lewiston had suggestions, of course. Mrs. Henshaw offered me a position as a housemaid. Mrs. Fletcher thought I might work in the laundry. Both made it clear that a woman alone could not expect to maintain the social position she had enjoyed as a doctor's daughter." Nathan listened in silence, recognizing the old familiar story. The West was supposedly a place where anyone could start fresh, but certain rules still applied, especially for women. "I remembered my father mentioning old Mr. Morrison," Winnie continued. "He treated him a few times before he died. Father said Morrison had a cabin in the mountains, left to no one. So I took what little money I had left and bought supplies. I thought I could stay here until I figured out what to do next." She looked at Nathan directly, her dark eyes fierce. "I would rather starve alone up here than accept their charity and their judgment." "You do not have to starve," Nathan said quietly. He held out the venison again. "Will you take it?" Winnie looked at the bundle for a long moment, pride warring with practicality on her face. Finally, she reached out and took it. Her fingers brushed his, cold despite the fall weather. Thank you," she whispered. "I will pay you back somehow." "No need." Nathan shifted awkwardly, aware of how long it had been since he had carried on a conversation with another person that lasted more than 5 minutes. "The books, you like them?" Her face transformed, lighting up with genuine pleasure. "Oh yes. The Cooper novel, it is wonderful. I finished it the first night and went back to read my favorite parts again. I'd not realized how much I missed reading." She paused. My father had a whole library. I spent hours in there every day. When the creditors came, watching them box up his books was almost worse than losing the house. Something in Nathan's chest tightened. I have a few more, he heard himself say. Not many, but you are welcome to them. I will bring them by. I could not possibly take more from you. They are just gathering dust at my place. Books should be read. He turned to leave, then paused. Miss Matthews, do you know how to shoot that rifle you keep pointing at people? She flushed. I know which end the bullet comes out of. That's not quite the same thing. Would you like me to teach you? If you are going to live up here alone, you should know how to handle it properly. Winnie studied him with those dark, searching eyes. Nathan wondered what she saw, whether his 7 years of solitude had left visible marks. He was only 32, but he felt older, worn down by silence and memories. Why are you being kind to me? She asked finally. What do you want? It was a fair question. In Nathan's experience, kindness usually came with a price, especially for women alone. Nothing, he said honestly. I just figure we are both up here trying to escape something. Might as well help each other survive while we are at it. What are you escaping from? The question was too direct, and Nathan felt his walls going up automatically. But there was no judgment in her face, only curiosity and a kind of weary recognition. The same things as most men who came west after the war, he said finally. Memories, expectations, the person I used to be. Winnie nodded slowly, as if this answer satisfied her. All right then. You can teach me to shoot, and I will accept your books. But I am keeping track, Mr. Zimmerman. When I get back on my feet, I will find a way to repay you. Nathan tipped his hat. Fair enough, Miss Matthews. As he walked back up the mountain, Nathan realized he was smiling, the expression feeling strange and unfamiliar on his face. He had spoken more words in the past 10 minutes than he usually spoke in a week, and instead of feeling drained, he felt lighter somehow. It was a dangerous feeling, he thought. The whole point of his isolation was to avoid connections, to avoid the possibility of loss that connections inevitably brought. But when he reached his cabin and looked at the 3 remaining books on his shelf, he found himself already planning which ones to bring to Winnie next. The shooting lessons became a regular occurrence. 3 times a week, Nathan would make his way down to Morrison's cabin, and he and Winnie would spend an hour or 2 in the clearing behind the house, working on her aim and her stance. She was a quick learner, intense and focused in the same way she had been while reading. Within 2 weeks, she could reliably hit a target at 20 yards. Within a month, she was good enough that Nathan no longer worried quite so much about her safety. The lessons invariably led to conversation. At first, they kept to safe topics, discussing the books he brought her or the habits of the animals in the area. But gradually, in fragments and pieces, their stories emerged. Nathan learned that Winnie had been 19 when her mother died of pneumonia, leaving her alone with her grief-stricken father. She had essentially run his household for the past 4 years, managing his appointments and his correspondence, while also devouring every book in his considerable library. I wanted to be a teacher, she told him one afternoon as they walked back from target practice. November had given way to December, and snow dusted the ground. Father said I had the mind for it, but women teachers are supposed to be young and unmarried, and they are expected to live in a boarding house under the watchful eye of the school board. After Father died, the school board made it clear that a woman in my situation, without family or means, was not suitable for their students. Your situation? Nathan asked carefully. Poor, Winnie said bluntly. They meant poor, as if poverty were contagious, as if my father's debts were somehow a moral failing that I inherited along with his books and his furniture. The bitterness in her voice was familiar to Nathan. He had heard it in his own thoughts often enough after the war, after he had returned home to find his family farm sold off for taxes, his parents dead, his younger brother lost to typhoid fever. The world had a way of punishing people for circumstances beyond their control and then acting as if the punishment were deserved. You could still teach, he pointed out. Up here, there are families scattered through these mountains. They would probably be grateful for someone willing to educate their children. Winnie looked at him with surprise. I had not thought of that. Think about it, Nathan said. You could put up a notice in Lewiston, offer lessons here at the cabin. You would be on your own terms then, not dependent on anybody's charity. He could see the idea taking root in her mind, her expression shifting from skeptical to considering, to cautiously hopeful. It made him feel useful in a way he had not felt in years, as though his presence in the world might actually matter to someone. In return, Winnie coaxed Nathan's own story out of him in careful increments. She did not push, but she listened with complete attention whenever he offered a piece of his past. He told her about Shiloh, about the 3 days of fighting that had killed or wounded nearly a quarter of all the men involved. He told her about watching his best friend die in the mud, calling for his mother like a child. He told her about coming home to nothing, about drifting west because there was nothing left to keep him in Ohio. "I thought if I could get far enough away, I could forget," he said one evening. They were sitting on the porch of Winnie's cabin, watching the sun set over the mountains. It had become a habit somehow, Nathan stopping by most evenings with whatever he had hunted that day, staying to share a simple meal and talk until darkness fell. But you cannot forget. You can only get far enough away that the memories have more space around them. "Does it help?" Winnie asked softly. "The space?" Nathan considered the question. It did. For a while. But space can be its own kind of prison. You get so used to being alone that you forget how to be any other way. Winnie turned to look at him, her face barely visible in the gathering dusk. "Is that what you want? To forget how to be any other way?" It was a dangerous question, and Nathan knew the answer had changed somewhere in the past few weeks. He had spent 7 years building walls around himself, and Winnie had somehow slipped through them without his noticing. He looked forward to their evenings together now. He found himself thinking of things to tell her, stories to share, questions to ask. He noticed the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was concentrating, the way she laughed with her whole body when something genuinely amused her, the way her eyes softened when she talked about books she loved. "No," he said finally. "I do not think it is." They sat in silence for a while, but it was a comfortable silence, full of things unsaid but understood. When Nathan finally rose to leave, heading back up the mountain to his own cabin, he was acutely aware of Winnie standing in the doorway, backlit by the lamp he had given her, watching him go. December deepened into winter. Snow fell heavy and frequent, blanketing the mountains in white. Nathan brought Winnie a cord of wood he had spent 3 days cutting and splitting, stacking it neatly beside her cabin despite her protests. He also brought a slab of bacon, a sack of cornmeal, and a tin of coffee, claiming he had overbought on his last trip to Lewiston. This was a lie. He had bought the supplies specifically for her, using precious cash from his dwindling savings, but he knew she would refuse if she knew the truth. "You are going to make me indebted to you forever," Winnie complained, but her eyes were warm as she helped him carry the supplies inside. "Consider it payment for the meals you keep feeding me," Nathan said. This was closer to the truth. Winnie had started cooking whenever he visited. Simple meals, but prepared with care. It turned out she was good with the limited ingredients available, creative in ways that reminded Nathan of his mother. "That is hardly equal," Winnie protested. "You bring the meat and half the ingredients." "You bring the company," Nathan said, and then flushed, aware he had revealed more than he intended. But Winnie just smiled, and it was like the sun coming out. "I suppose I do, and I suppose you bring the same. So perhaps we are even after all." Christmas came and went quietly. Nathan spent the day with Winnie, and she produced a small feast from seemingly nothing: roasted grouse, biscuits, dried apple pie sweetened with a precious bit of honey. Nathan contributed a bottle of whiskey he had been saving for no particular occasion. They ate by lamplight, the cabin warm and close, snow falling softly outside. "I have something for you," Winnie said after they had finished eating. She disappeared into the tiny bedroom and emerged with a package wrapped in brown paper. Nathan opened it carefully and found a shirt, new made from blue wool, the stitching small and precise. He stared at it, unable to speak. It had been years since anyone had made him anything, since anyone had cared enough to spend time and effort on his comfort. "I traded some of my old dresses in Lewiston for the fabric," Winnie explained, suddenly nervous. "I noticed your shirts were getting worn, and I thought you could use a new one. It might not fit right. I had to guess at the measurements." "It is perfect," Nathan managed. His voice came out rough. "Thank you." "I had to do something," Winnie said. "You have given me so much. The lamp, the books, the food, the shooting lessons. This is barely anything compared to all that." Nathan looked up at her standing in the lamplight, her face anxious and hopeful. It is not barely anything. It is everything. The words hung between them, weighted with meaning beyond a simple shirt. Winnie's breath caught, and Nathan saw awareness bloom in her eyes, that recognition of something shifting between them, something deeper than friendship or neighborly kindness. "I have something for you too," he said, standing up. He pulled a small package from his coat pocket, wrapped in cloth. "It's not much." Winnie unwrapped it and gasped. Inside was a book, leather-bound and gilt-edged, the pages crisp and clean. "Jane Eyre," she read from the cover. "Oh, Nathan, this must have cost a fortune." "I ordered it special from a merchant in Lewiston," Nathan admitted. "He had a catalog. I remembered you mentioning you had always wanted to read it. It took 2 months to arrive." 2 months, which meant Nathan had ordered it in October, right after meeting her, before they had become whatever they were now becoming. Winnie looked up at him, her eyes bright with tears. "Why?" she whispered. "Why did you do all this?" Nathan could have deflected, could have made a joke or changed the subject. But it was Christmas, and they were alone in a cabin in the mountains, and he was tired of hiding from the truth. "Because from the moment I saw you reading by that candle, I could not stop thinking about you," he said. "Because you made me remember what it felt like to care about something beyond just surviving. Because I fell in love with you, Winnie, and I am tired of pretending I did not." The silence stretched out between them, fragile as glass. Then Winnie set the book down carefully on the table and crossed the space between them. She reached up and touched Nathan's face, her fingers gentle against his bearded cheek. "I fell in love with you too," she said. "I think it happened the first day when you left those books on my doorstep and walked away expecting nothing in return. Nobody has ever done something like that for me. Nobody has ever seen what I needed and given it freely." Nathan pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her, feeling her warmth and solidity against him. She fit perfectly, her head tucked under his chin, her arms around his waist. They stood like that for a long time, not speaking, just holding each other while the fire crackled and the snow fell outside. When they finally pulled apart, Nathan looked into Winnie's face and saw his own emotions reflected there. Wonder, fear, hope, and something fiercer, something like determination. "I do not have much to offer," he said. "Just a cabin and a hard life in the mountains. It is not what you deserve." "It is exactly what I deserve," Winnie corrected him. "A good man and an honest life and books by lamplight. What more could anyone want?" Nathan kissed her then, softly at first, then deeper as she responded with equal intensity. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. "Brr, marry me," he said. "Not because you need protection or support, but because I love you and I want to spend every day of the rest of my life with you." "Yes," Winnie said without hesitation. "Yes, I will marry you, Nathan Zimmerman." They married in January, in a simple ceremony in Lewiston, performed by a circuit judge. Nathan wore the blue wool shirt Winnie had made him. Winnie wore a dress of dark green wool, also new made, her hair pinned up and covered with a simple bonnet. There were no guests, just the judge and his wife as witnesses. The good ladies of Lewiston watched from a distance, their faces sharp with curiosity and disapproval. Nathan did not care. He held Winnie's hand and spoke his vows clearly, meaning every word. When the judge pronounced them married, Nathan kissed his wife with complete disregard for propriety, and Winnie kissed him back with equal enthusiasm. They walked out of the courthouse together, husband and wife, facing the cold January wind and the judgmental stares with their heads high. The first months of marriage were an adjustment. Nathan moved into Morrison's cabin, which was closer to Lewiston and had more room than his old place. Together they worked to make it truly habitable, patching the roof, reinforcing the walls, installing proper shutters on the windows. Nathan brought down his few possessions, including the remainder of his books, which Winnie integrated joyfully with the small collection he had already given her. They also pursued Winnie's idea of teaching. She posted notices in Lewiston and at the trading posts scattered through the mountains, advertising lessons in reading, writing, arithmetic, and literature. Within a month, she had 5 students, children of homesteaders and miners who saw education as a path to a better life for their offspring. Within 3 months, she had 12. The students came twice a week, their parents paying what they could in coin or trade. Winnie taught in the main room of the cabin, using slates and shared books, her face alight with enthusiasm. Nathan built her a proper desk and a bookshelf, using lumber he hauled up from Lewiston over the course of several trips. He also built benches for the students to sit on, making sure they were sturdy enough to withstand the rough treatment of active children. Watching Winnie teach filled Nathan with a fierce pride. She was good at it, patient but firm, able to explain difficult concepts in ways that made sense to young minds. Her students adored her, bringing her small gifts, a handful of wildflowers, a smooth river stone, a drawing of a horse. Winnie treasured each offering, displaying them prominently on the shelf alongside her precious books. But the teaching brought complications, too. Some of the parents were suspicious of Nathan, this mountain man their children's teacher had married. They asked pointed questions about his background, his intentions. A few pulled their children out of lessons, declaring that they would not have their sons and daughters educated by a woman living in sin with a hermit. Winnie was hurt, but defiant. "Let them keep their children ignorant then," she said. "We do not need their approval." But Nathan saw how the rejection stung her, how she checked anxiously each week to see if any more students would be pulled. He decided to make an effort, going into Lewiston more frequently, making conversation with the men at the trading post, being visible and steady and reliable. Slowly, grudgingly, the community began to accept them. Nathan Zimmerman might be a recluse, but he paid his debts and kept his word. Winnie Zimmerman might have scandalous ideas about education and independence, but she was a good teacher and a devoted wife. Spring came late to the mountains that year, snow lingering into April. But when it finally arrived, it came in a rush of green and growth. Winnie planted a garden behind the cabin, coaxing vegetables from the rocky soil. Nathan expanded his trap lines, bringing in enough furs to ensure they would have cash for supplies. In the evenings, they sat together on the porch, reading by lamplight or simply talking, watching the stars emerge over the mountains. "Are you happy?" Nathan asked one evening in May. They had been married 4 months, and he still woke sometimes in disbelief, amazed to find Winnie beside him, her dark hair spread across the pillow, her breath soft and even. Winnie set down her book and looked at him. "Happier than I have ever been in my life. Why do you ask?" "Because you gave up a lot to be here. Society, comfort, the possibility of an easier life." "I did not give up anything that mattered," Winnie said firmly. "I chose what I wanted, Nathan. I chose you. I chose this life. Do not doubt that." "I do not doubt you," Nathan said. "I just want to make sure you never regret it." Winnie moved closer, curling against his side. "The only thing I would regret is not having more books," she said lightly. "We have read through all of ours 3 times now. We are going to need new ones soon." Nathan laughed. "I will see what I can do." He made a trip to Lewiston the following week and spent nearly an hour in the general store, looking through the merchant's catalog of books available for order. He selected 4 titles: a novel by Dickens, a collection of poetry, a history of the American Revolution, and a book on natural philosophy. It would take months for them to arrive and would cost more than Nathan wanted to spend, but the look on Winnie's face when he told her about the order made every penny worthwhile. "4 books!" she exclaimed, her eyes huge. "Nathan, that is too much." "It is not too much. Nothing is too much if it makes you happy." Winnie threw her arms around him, nearly knocking him over. "You make me happy. Everything else is just wonderful extra." That summer was the best of Nathan's life. He and Winnie fell into an easy rhythm, their days full of work and their evenings full of each other. They talked endlessly, about everything and nothing, sharing thoughts and dreams and memories. They made love with increasing confidence and joy, learning each other's bodies and preferences. They laughed together, worked together, faced challenges together. In July, a group of men came through the mountains, rough-looking types who made Nathan immediately wary. They stopped at the cabin, asking for water and directions. Nathan provided both curtly, aware of the way their eyes lingered on Winnie, who had wisely stayed inside with the rifle. After they left, Nathan checked his weapons and made sure the cabin was secure. "Do you think they will come back?" Winnie asked, fear evident in her voice. "Maybe. Probably not. Men like that are usually just passing through." But Nathan did not quite believe his own reassurance. He spent the night awake, sitting by the window with his rifle across his knees, watching the darkness. The men did not return that night or the next, but 3 days later, Nathan found one of his trap lines destroyed, the trap stolen, and a crude warning carved into a tree. Get out! Rage and fear warred in Nathan's chest. He had faced violence before, during the war and after, but that was different. Then he had only himself to worry about. Now he had Winnie to protect, Winnie to keep safe. He returned to the cabin and told her what he had found. "We are not leaving," Winnie said immediately, her face pale but determined. "This is our home. We are not letting some bandits drive us out." "I know," Nathan said, "but we need to be careful, and we need help." He rode into Lewiston the next day and reported the incident to the town's marshal, a grizzled former Army officer named Clancy. The marshal listened carefully, took notes, and promised to send word to the other settlements in the area to be on the lookout for suspicious men. "You are not the first to report trouble," Clancy said. "There has been a group working the mountain passes, stealing from trappers and miners. They have not hurt anyone yet, but it is only a matter of time. I will organize a posse to patrol the area." The posse found the bandits' camp 2 weeks later and arrested 4 men without a shot being fired. They turned out to be deserters from an army post in Montana, living off theft and intimidation. The marshal brought them back to Lewiston in chains, and Nathan attended the trial, wanting to see their faces when justice was served. The men were sentenced to 5 years hard labor, and Nathan returned home with a sense of relief. The danger was past. He and Winnie could go back to their peaceful existence, but the incident had shaken something loose in Nathan. He realized how precarious their life was, how dependent on his ability to protect and provide. What if something happened to him? What if he got injured on the trap lines, or fell ill, or simply did not come home one day? Winnie would be alone again, vulnerable again. He raised these concerns one evening, and Winnie listened patiently before taking his hands in hers. "Nathan, life is precarious for everyone, everywhere. We cannot protect ourselves against every possible danger. All we can do is live fully in the time we have and trust that we are strong enough to face whatever comes." "But if something happened to me, then I would grieve and I would survive," Winnie interrupted, "just as you would if something happened to me. We are not fragile, Nathan. We are both survivors. That is part of why we understand each other so well." Her words made sense, but they did not entirely ease Nathan's fears. He found himself being extra careful, checking his weapons obsessively, watching the tree line for threats. Winnie noticed, of course. She always noticed. "You're doing it again," she said one afternoon. They were working in the garden together, pulling weeds and checking on the vegetables. "Carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders. I just want to keep you safe. I know, and I love you for it. But Nathan, you cannot protect me from everything, and I do not want you to try. I want a partner, not a guard." Nathan sat back on his heels, struck by her words. "You are right. I am sorry. Do not apologize. Just trust me a little more. Trust us." He did try after that, consciously letting go of some of his protective instincts, allowing Winnie the independence she needed and deserved. It was hard going against years of ingrained habits, but it was also liberating. They were partners, equals, each bringing different strengths to their shared life. August brought the books Nathan had ordered. He carried them home from Lewiston like precious treasure, and Winnie actually squealed with delight when she unwrapped them. They spent the entire evening examining each volume, reading passages aloud to each other, planning which one to start first. "The Dickens," Winnie decided. "I've wanted to read this one for years." They read it together over the course of 3 weeks, taking turns with the chapters, discussing the characters and plot developments. It became their evening ritual, and Nathan found himself looking forward to it as much as Winnie did. The stories drew him in despite his initial skepticism, carrying him to places he had never been, showing him lives entirely different from his own. "This is what I love about books," Winnie said one night. She was curled against Nathan's side, the lamp casting a warm glow over both of them. "They remind you that the world is bigger than your own experience, that there are infinite ways to live and love and be. They also remind you that most people's problems are pretty much the same, no matter where or when they live," Nathan observed. "Love, loss, hope, fear. The specifics change, but the emotions do not." Winnie tilted her head to look up at him. "When did you become a philosopher?" "When I married a woman who makes me think about things beyond trapping and survival." "I am glad," Winnie said softly. "You have a good mind, Nathan." It would be a shame to waste it on just trapping and survival. Her words stayed with him. Nathan had never thought of himself as particularly intelligent or educated. He could read and write, do sums, track animals, and survive in the wilderness. Those were practical skills, useful skills. But Winnie seemed to think he was capable of more, and her faith made him want to prove her right. He started reading more seriously, not just for entertainment, but for understanding. He worked through the Emerson essays, puzzling over the dense prose. He read the history of the Revolution and found himself fascinated by the complex political maneuvering behind the battles. He even attempted Shakespeare, though he found the language challenging. Winnie helped, explaining context and meaning, drawing connections between the texts and their own lives. She made learning feel natural, an extension of their evening conversations rather than a chore. Nathan found his mind expanding, his understanding of the world deepening. He began to see patterns and connections he had never noticed before. Fall came again, their second together. Winnie's school had grown to 15 students, and she was considering expanding to 4 days a week instead of 2. Nathan's trap lines were productive, and he had saved enough to think about building an addition onto the cabin, giving them more space. In October, Winnie missed her monthly cycle. She did not say anything at first, not wanting to raise hopes prematurely. But when November came and went with no change, she told Nathan over breakfast one morning, her face a mixture of excitement and nervousness. "I think I am pregnant," she said simply. Nathan set down his coffee cup carefully, aware his hands were trembling. "You're sure?" "As sure as I can be without a doctor's confirmation. All the signs are there." A baby. They were going to have a baby. The news should have filled Nathan with pure joy, but instead he felt a complicated tangle of emotions: happiness, fear, wonder, and a deep, aching vulnerability. A child would change everything. They would be responsible for another life, fragile and dependent. What if something went wrong? What if he was not a good father? What if the wilderness they loved proved too dangerous for a child? "Nathan," Winnie said gently, "breathe." He realized he had been holding his breath. He let it out in a rush and reached for Winnie's hand. "I am happy. I am terrified, but I'm happy." "Me too," Winnie admitted. "On both counts. But we will figure it out together. We always do." They told no one for the first few months, wanting to keep the news private until Winnie was further along. But as winter set in and her condition became more obvious, they had to start informing people. Winnie's students were delighted, the older girls especially excited about the prospect of a baby. The parents were more circumspect, but generally supportive. Nathan made lists of everything they would need: a cradle, blankets, diapers, baby clothes. Winnie laughed at his meticulous planning, but he could tell she was touched by his care. He built the cradle himself during the long winter evenings, carving the wood with painstaking attention to detail. It had to be perfect, had to be safe, had to be worthy of their child. Winnie continued teaching through her pregnancy, finally stopping in March when she was too uncomfortable to stand for long periods. Her students made her gifts: embroidered blankets, knitted booties, a primer illustrated with careful drawings. Winnie cried when she saw them, hormones and gratitude overwhelming her usually steady emotions. "They love you," Nathan said, holding her while she wept. "They want to show it. I know, I'm being foolish. You're being human and pregnant. I've heard the two often go together." Winnie laughed through her tears and kissed him. "What would I do without you?" "You would manage fine," Nathan said honestly, "but I'm glad you do not have to." The baby came in late April, after a labor that lasted nearly 20 hours. Nathan had ridden to Lewiston to fetch the midwife, an experienced woman named Mrs. Chen who had delivered half the babies in the territory. She arrived calm and competent, took charge of the situation, and guided Winnie through the ordeal with steady encouragement. Nathan was banished to the porch, which he paced for hours, listening to Winnie's cries and feeling utterly helpless. This was worse than any battle, any danger he had ever faced, because there was nothing he could do. Winnie was fighting alone, and all he could offer was his presence in the next room. Finally, as dawn broke over the mountains, he heard a new sound: the thin, indignant wail of a newborn. Nathan's knees nearly gave out with relief. Moments later, Mrs. Chen opened the door, her face tired but smiling. "You have a son," she said, "healthy lungs on him, and all his fingers and toes accounted for. Your wife did beautifully." Nathan pushed past her into the bedroom. Winnie lay propped against the pillows, her hair sweat-soaked, her face pale with exhaustion. But she was smiling, and in her arms was a tiny bundle wrapped in a blanket. Nathan approached slowly, hardly daring to breathe. "Meet your son," Winnie said softly. Nathan looked down at the baby and felt his heart crack open. He was so small, so impossibly small, with a red wrinkled face and tiny fists waving in the air. His eyes were closed, and he made small snuffling sounds as he rooted against Winnie's chest. "He is perfect," Nathan whispered. "He is," Winnie agreed. "What should we name him?" They had discussed names for months without reaching a decision, but looking at his son now, Nathan knew with sudden certainty. "James," he said, "after your father, James Zimmerman." Tears filled Winnie's eyes. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure. Your father would have been proud of you, Winnie, of who you have become, of how strong you are. Our son should carry his name." "James," Winnie repeated, testing it. "Jimmy. I like it." Mrs. Chen stayed for 3 days, teaching them how to care for the baby, making sure Winnie recovered properly. When she finally left, Nathan paid her generously and thanked her with genuine feeling. Then he closed the door and turned to face his new life. Winnie recovering in bed, baby James asleep in his carefully crafted cradle, the cabin filled with a sense of completeness Nathan had never imagined possible. The first weeks were exhausting. James woke every few hours to nurse, and Winnie was too sore and tired to do much beyond feeding him and sleeping when he slept. Nathan took over everything else: cooking, cleaning, managing the trap lines, dealing with the few students whose parents wanted to continue lessons once Winnie felt up to teaching again. He also spent hours just watching his son sleep, marveling at the tiny features, the delicate perfection of miniature fingers and toes. James had Winnie's dark hair and Nathan's strong chin. He had a lusty cry when he was hungry and a habit of clutching at whoever held him with surprising strength. "He is going to be big like you," Winnie observed one afternoon. Nathan was holding James, the baby looking impossibly small against his broad chest. "Look at those hands." "Better he gets your brains," Nathan said. "He will get both, and your courage and my stubbornness. He's going to be formidable." "He's going to be loved," Nathan corrected. "That is what matters." As spring turned to summer, they settled into a new routine. Winnie resumed teaching part-time, with Nathan helping to watch James during lessons. The students were fascinated by the baby, the younger ones especially eager to hold him or help with his care. Nathan built a larger porch so Winnie could teach outside when the weather was good, and James could sleep in his cradle nearby. Nathan found fatherhood transforming him in unexpected ways. He had always been protective of Winnie, but that was nothing compared to the fierce primal need to keep his son safe. At the same time, holding James, feeling that tiny body relax trustingly in his arms, brought out a gentleness Nathan had thought the war had killed in him. "You are good at this," Winnie told him one evening. They were sitting together on the porch, Nathan rocking James to sleep. "Being a father. I am terrified every moment that I will do something wrong." "That just means you care. The worst parents are the ones who think they have all the answers." Nathan looked down at his sleeping son. "I want to give him everything, a good life, opportunities, education, everything we did not have." "We will," Winnie said confidently. "Together." James grew quickly, as babies do. By fall he was sitting up, grabbing at everything in reach, babbling enthusiastically. By winter he was crawling, getting into everything, requiring constant supervision. By spring, he was pulling himself up on furniture, taking tentative steps, exploring his world with fearless determination. "He has no sense of danger," Nathan said in exasperation one afternoon, after catching James trying to pull a pot of boiling water off the stove. "He is a year old," Winnie pointed out. "He's not supposed to have sense yet. That's what parents are for." They celebrated James's first birthday with a small party, inviting a few of the families whose children Winnie taught. It was a warm May afternoon, and they set up tables outside, serving simple food and watching the children play. James was the center of attention, toddling between guests, accepting cuddles and presents with equal enthusiasm. Nathan stood on the porch, watching the scene, and felt a profound sense of gratitude. 2.5 years ago, he had been alone on this mountain, convinced that solitude was all he deserved or could handle. Now he had a wife he loved, a son who filled him with wonder, and a community that had slowly, grudgingly, come to accept them. His life had meaning beyond mere survival. "What are you thinking?" Winnie asked, coming to stand beside him. She slipped her hand into his. "I'm thinking about how much has changed, how much you changed me." "We changed each other," Winnie corrected. "I was just as lost as you were, Nathan. We found each other at exactly the right time." "Because you were reading by candlelight," Nathan said. "If I had not seen that, if I had just walked past—" "But you did not walk past. You saw someone who needed something, and you provided it. That says everything about who you are." Nathan pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. "I love you. I love you too. Always." That summer, disaster nearly struck. Nathan was working his northern trapline when he surprised a grizzly bear, a massive old male that had been raiding the traps. The bear charged, and Nathan barely had time to get his rifle up. He fired twice, both shots hitting, but the bear kept coming. It was on him before he could reload, one huge paw swiping at his chest. Nathan threw himself backward, feeling claws rake across his ribs. He fell hard, cracking his head on a rock. The bear loomed over him, roaring, and Nathan fumbled for his knife, knowing it was futile, but refusing to die without fighting. Then the bear stumbled, coughing blood. It took 2 more steps and collapsed, dead from Nathan's shots, its momentum the only thing that had carried it forward. Nathan lay there, bleeding and stunned, watching the bear's massive body shudder and go still. It took him an hour to make it back to the cabin, leaving the dead bear where it fell. He was dizzy from blood loss, and his ribs screamed with every breath. Winnie saw him coming and ran out, her face white with terror. "Nathan! Oh God, Nathan, what happened?" "Grizzly," Nathan managed. "I'm all right, just scratched." "You're not all right. You're covered in blood, inside now. We need to get those wounds cleaned." Winnie had learned basic medical care from her father, and she put that knowledge to use now, cleaning and bandaging Nathan's injuries with steady hands despite her fear. The claw marks were deep but had missed anything vital. His head wound was superficial but had bled dramatically. Overall, he had been incredibly lucky. "You could have died," Winnie said once she had finished. Her voice was steady, but tears ran down her face. "You could have left us. I know, I'm sorry. Do not apologize, just promise me you will be more careful." "I promise." Nathan spent a week recovering, and in that time he did a lot of thinking. The bear attack had reminded him how fragile life was, how quickly everything could change. He had responsibilities now, people depending on him. He could not take unnecessary risks anymore. When he was well enough to move around, he went back to the site of the attack and butchered the bear, salvaging the hide and meat. But he also made a decision. He was done with trapping, done with spending days alone in the mountains where anything could happen. It was time to find a different way to make a living, something that kept him closer to home. He discussed this with Winnie that evening, explaining his reasoning. She listened quietly, then nodded. "I think that is wise. What will you do instead?" "I thought I might start a freight business, hauling supplies from Lewiston to the mining camps and homesteads. It is steady work, and I know the trails better than anyone." "That sounds perfect," Winnie said, "and I can help with the bookkeeping and scheduling." So Nathan transitioned from trapper to freighter. He bought a sturdy wagon and a team of mules, advertised his services in Lewiston, and quickly found himself with more business than he could handle. The mining camps were always in need of supplies, and the homesteaders appreciated having someone reliable who could bring them goods from town. Nathan charged fair prices and never missed a delivery, building a reputation for dependability. The freight business meant he was gone for a few days at a time, but it was nothing like the weeks he had spent on trap lines. He could plan his trips around Winnie's teaching schedule, and he always came home to his family. The work was hard but satisfying, and the income was steady. James grew from a toddler to a young boy, curious and energetic and bright. He adored books just like his mother, and by the time he was 4, he could already read simple words. Winnie taught him formally when he turned 5, bringing him into her classroom with the other students. Nathan worried that James might struggle or feel self-conscious, but he thrived, soaking up knowledge like a sponge. "He is gifted," Winnie told Nathan proudly, "truly gifted. We need to make sure he gets the best education possible." "We will," Nathan promised, "whatever it takes." They had more books now, dozens of them, acquired gradually through orders and trades and gifts. They filled the shelves Nathan had built, turning one whole wall of the cabin into a library. It was Winnie's pride and joy, and she spent hours organizing and reorganizing the volumes, reading to James in the evenings, fostering the same love of stories and learning that had sustained her through difficult times. When James was 6, Winnie told Nathan she was pregnant again. This time, Nathan was more prepared, less terrified, though no less protective. The pregnancy progressed smoothly, and in the spring of 1881, Winnie delivered a daughter they named Lily. If James had been a relatively easy baby, Lily was his opposite. She cried constantly, slept poorly, and seemed perpetually dissatisfied. Nathan walked the floor with her for hours, trying everything to soothe her colicky screams. Winnie was exhausted, trying to manage a newborn and a 6-year-old and a classroom full of students. "I cannot do this," she said one night, breaking down in tears. "I cannot handle everything." "You do not have to," Nathan said firmly. "You are taking a break from teaching, for however long you need. I am doing well enough with the freight business to support us. But the students will understand. Their parents will understand. Your health and sanity come first, Winnie." So Winnie suspended her classes for the summer, focusing entirely on caring for Lily and recovering from the birth. Gradually, as Lily's colic eased and she settled into a routine, things became more manageable. By fall, Winnie was ready to teach again, though she scaled back to just 1 day a week. Lily grew into a sweet-tempered little girl, curious and affectionate. She adored her big brother, following James everywhere, and she had Winnie's dark eyes and Nathan's sturdy build. James doted on her, reading to her from the books he loved, including her in his games, protecting her with a fierceness that reminded Nathan of himself. The years passed in a blur of hard work and simple joys. Nathan's freight business continued to grow. Winnie's school became a fixture in the mountain community, with students traveling from miles around to learn from her. James developed into a serious, thoughtful boy with a passion for books and learning. Lily was sunshine personified, always laughing, always exploring. In 1884, when James was 10 and Lily was 3, they made a big decision. The cabin, which had served them well for over a decade, was simply too small for their growing family. Nathan proposed building a new house, larger and sturdier, on the same property. "Are you sure?" Winnie asked. "That's a huge undertaking." "I'm sure. We need the space, and I want to build something that will last, something we can pass down to our children." They designed the house together, sketching plans on paper, arguing good-naturedly about layout and features. Nathan wanted a large porch, wrapping around 2 sides. Winnie insisted on a separate room for her school, with good windows for light. They both agreed on a proper library, big enough to house their ever-growing collection of books. Construction took all summer and most of the fall. Nathan did much of the work himself, with help from neighbors who owed him favors. The house rose slowly. Sturdy log walls, a stone fireplace, real glass windows ordered from Lewiston. It was the finest building in the mountains, and Nathan poured his heart into every beam and shingle. They moved in just before Christmas, and that first evening in their new home, Nathan lit fires in both the main room and the library. Winnie walked through the rooms, running her hands over the walls, smiling at the space and light. "It is perfect," she said, "more than I ever dreamed." "You deserve more than this," Nathan said. "You deserve everything." "I have everything," Winnie corrected. "I have you and our children in a home and work that I love. What more could I possibly want?" That night, lying in their new bedroom under a warm quilt, Nathan thought about the journey that had brought them here. From that first glimpse of Winnie reading by candlelight to this moment, warm and safe in a house he had built with his own hands, with his wife beside him, and his children sleeping down the hall. It was more than he had ever expected from life, more than he had believed himself capable of achieving. "What are you thinking?" Winnie asked sleepily. "I am thinking about lamps and books," Nathan said, "and how sometimes the smallest gesture can change everything." Winnie propped herself up on one elbow, looking at him in the darkness. "That oil lamp you brought me. I still have it, you know. I could never bring myself to throw it away, even when we got nicer ones." "Where is it?" "In my desk in the library. I keep important papers in it now, but sometimes I light it, just to remember." "Remember what?" "The moment I realized there were still good people in the world, The moment I began to hope again. She kissed him softly. You saved my life, Nathan, not just from poverty or loneliness, but from giving up. You reminded me that I was worth saving. You saved mine too, Nathan said roughly. I was already dead when I met you, just too stubborn to admit it. You brought me back to life. They held each other close, and Nathan felt the years falling away until they were back in that first moment, him outside the window, her inside reading by dying candlelight, neither knowing how much they would come to mean to each other. The years continued to unfold. James grew tall and strong, inheriting his father's size and his mother's sharp mind. He talked about becoming a teacher like Winnie, or maybe a lawyer, using words to fight injustice. Nathan encouraged him in whatever he chose, knowing his son had opportunities Nathan himself had never dreamed of. Lily remained sunny and bright, but she also showed an unexpected talent for numbers. By the time she was 7, she could calculate freight loads and prices faster than Nathan, and she loved helping with the business accounts. Winnie started teaching her more advanced mathematics, fascinated by her daughter's natural aptitude. In 1888, when Nathan was 48 and Winnie was 42, they sat on their porch one evening watching the sunset. James was 16 now, tall and serious and preparing to leave for school in Boise in the fall. Lily was 9, still more child than young woman, but growing up faster than Nathan liked to acknowledge. Our babies are not babies anymore, Winnie said, echoing his thoughts. No, but they are good people. We did all right by them. Better than all right. Winnie took his hand. Do you ever regret it, giving up your solitude, taking on all these responsibilities? Nathan did not even have to think about it. Never. Not for a single moment. My life before you was not really living. It was just existing. You taught me the difference. We taught each other, Winnie said. That is what love is, I think. Teaching each other how to live. James left for school in September, and the house felt strangely empty without his steady presence. But he wrote long letters every week, full of details about his classes and the books he was reading and the ideas he was forming about law and justice. Nathan read the letters with pride so fierce it hurt. Lily threw herself into her studies with new intensity, as if trying to fill the gap her brother had left. She took over more of the business bookkeeping, freeing Nathan to spend more time on the actual hauling. She also started helping Winnie with the younger students, showing a patience and clarity of explanation that reminded Nathan of her mother. In 1890, they received word that James had been accepted to study law at a university in San Francisco. It was a tremendous opportunity, but it would take him far away for several years. When he came home that summer to tell them in person, Nathan saw the excitement and trepidation warring on his son's face. I want to go, James said, but I worry about leaving you all here. We will manage, Nathan said gruffly. This is your chance, son. Take it. Your father is right, Winnie added. We have worked hard to give you opportunities. It would break our hearts if you did not pursue them. So James went to San Francisco, and his letters now came less frequently but were full of passionate descriptions of his studies and the injustices he wanted to fight. Nathan and Winnie read them together by lamplight, just as they had read books together for nearly 2 decades now, sharing the words and their reactions to them. Lily was 13 when a young man named Peter Dawson started making regular freight runs between Lewiston and the mining camps. He was 19, hard-working and earnest, and he came by the house frequently to ask Nathan's advice about routes and prices. Nathan helped him gladly, remembering his own early days in the freight business. It took Nathan several weeks to realize that Peter's frequent visits had less to do with business advice and more to do with Lily. The boy was smitten, and Lily, while still too young for serious courtship, clearly enjoyed his attention. Absolutely not, Nathan said to Winnie one evening. She is 13 years old. I know how old she is, and I am not suggesting we encourage a courtship, but we cannot lock her away forever, Nathan. She's going to grow up and fall in love just like we did. Not for years yet, Nathan said firmly. Many, many years. Winnie laughed. We will see. But she was right, as usual. Lily did grow up, and while Peter Dawson eventually moved on to court someone his own age, other young men took his place. By the time Lily was 17, she had several suitors, all of whom had to run the gauntlet of Nathan's intimidating presence and Winnie's shrewd evaluation. James came home in 1895, finished with his studies, a qualified lawyer at 23. He had job offers from firms in San Francisco and Portland, but he turned them all down. "I want to practice here," he told his parents. "Idaho needs lawyers who care about justice, not just profit. I want to help people like us, people trying to build lives on the frontier." Nathan could not have been prouder. James set up a practice in Lewiston, handling disputes and land claims and criminal defense for people who could not afford the big city lawyers. He made a modest living, but a huge difference, and Nathan heard his son's name spoken with respect throughout the territory. Lily, meanwhile, had fallen in love with a young surveyor named Thomas Reed. He was 22, educated, and utterly besotted with her. Nathan investigated him thoroughly and found nothing to object to, though he tried. Thomas was steady, hard-working, and treated Lily with genuine respect and affection. They married in 1897, when Lily was 18, in a ceremony at the house Nathan had built. Half the mountain community attended, along with James and several of his colleagues from Lewiston. It was a beautiful day, and watching his daughter exchange vows, Nathan felt the bittersweet mixture of joy and loss that all parents feel at such moments. After the wedding, after the guests had left and the house was quiet again, Nathan and Winnie sat on their porch in the gathering dusk. They were both in their 50s now, their hair graying, their bodies showing the wear of decades of hard work. But they still held hands, still sat close, still found comfort in each other's presence. "Both our children are grown and gone," Winnie said softly. "The house is going to be very quiet." "We will fill it with grandchildren soon enough," Nathan predicted. "Both James and Lily will have families of their own." "That is different. They will not be our babies." "No, but we will have each other. That's what we started with, Winnie. Just the two of us and an oil lamp and some books. Everything else has been a gift." Winnie leaned her head on his shoulder. "Do you remember that first night, when you left the lamp and the books on my doorstep?" "Of course I remember. It changed my life." "Mine too. I was so angry and scared and alone. And then this mountain man appeared with gifts and expected nothing in return. I thought you must be simple or crazy." Nathan laughed. "Maybe I was both. But I saw you reading by that tiny candle, straining your eyes in the dark, and I knew I had to help. I did not understand why at the time. I just knew. Because you recognized something in me, the same loneliness and determination you felt. We were mirrors for each other." "We still are," Nathan said, "after all these years." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars emerged overhead. From somewhere in the distance came the call of an owl, and closer by, the rustle of wind through the pines. It was the same mountain wilderness that Nathan had fled to all those years ago, seeking isolation and finding something infinitely better. James and Lily visited regularly, and as Nathan had predicted, grandchildren began arriving. James married a schoolteacher from Lewiston in 1899, and they had 3 children in quick succession. Lily and Thomas had 4 children over the course of 6 years, keeping Nathan and Winnie busy with visits and babysitting. The house that had felt too quiet after the children left was suddenly full of life again, echoing with young voices and laughter. Nathan built a larger porch swing to accommodate grandchildren, and Winnie kept a constant supply of cookies and stories. The library became a favorite gathering place, with children sprawled on the floor, reading or listening to their grandmother spin tales. Nathan continued running the freight business well into his 60s, though he eventually hired 2 young men to handle most of the actual hauling. He focused on the business side, scheduling and accounts, work that kept him active but did not require the physical labor he could no longer sustain. Winnie taught for another decade, finally retiring when she was 62. By then, she had educated 3 generations of mountain families, and her former students held positions of respect throughout Idaho. She had achieved what she set out to do all those years ago, made a difference through education, on her own terms. In 1910, Nathan turned 70, and Winnie turned 64. They had been married for 38 years, together for nearly 40. They had built a life and a legacy, raised children who were making their own positive marks on the world, and loved each other with a consistency that had weathered every storm. They sold the freight business to one of Nathan's employees, and officially retired, spending their days reading, tending a garden, and enjoying visits from their ever-expanding family. They had 12 grandchildren now, with more on the way, and the house was never quiet for long. One evening in late fall, sitting on their porch as they had done thousands of times before, Winnie turned to Nathan with a mischievous smile. "Do you know what I realized today?" "What?" "We have over 300 books in our library now." 300, Nathan. Remember when I had none and you brought me 5? Nathan laughed. "I remember. You looked at me like I was a miracle." "You were. You are." Winnie's expression grew serious. "Everything good in my life came from that moment, from you seeing me and caring enough to help. I was days away from giving up, Nathan, if you had not come along when you did. But I did. And you did not give up. You never gave up, Winnie. That is who you are." "Who we are," she corrected. "Together." Nathan pulled her close, kissing her temple. "Together," he agreed. They sat in silence as the sun set in a blaze of orange and gold behind the mountains. The same mountains where Nathan had hidden for 7 years, thinking he was finished with life. The same mountains where Winnie had fled, seeking refuge from judgment and poverty. The same mountains that had witnessed their meeting, their courtship, their marriage, the raising of their family, and the building of their legacy. "Do you think the lamp still works?" Nathan asked suddenly. "The one I gave you that first time?" "I do not know. It has been years since I lit it." "Why?" "I want to see it, want to remember." They went inside, and Winnie retrieved the old oil lamp from her desk. It was dented and tarnished now, the glass chimney cracked. But when she filled it with oil and struck a match, it lit just fine, casting the same warm glow it had provided 4 decades earlier. Nathan looked at Winnie in the lamplight, seeing both the young woman she had been and the older woman she had become. The years had marked her, but they had not diminished her. She was still fierce and intelligent and beautiful, still the person who had brought him back to life. "I love you," he said. "I have loved you from the moment I saw you reading by candlelight. I will love you until the day I die and beyond, if such things are possible." Tears shimmered in Winnie's eyes. "I love you too. You gave me everything, Nathan, light and books and a life worth living. You gave me yourself. There is no greater gift than that." They blew out the lamp eventually and went to bed, holding each other close. And if their children had asked them the secret to a long and happy marriage, they would have said it was simple. See what the other person needs, provide it freely, and build from there. Everything else is just details. The years continued to pass, gentle now, full of grandchildren and great-grandchildren, of books read by lamplight and evenings on the porch. Nathan and Winnie grew old together, their bodies failing, but their minds and hearts still strong. They held hands through ailments and losses, through the changing world that grew ever more modern around them. Nathan died peacefully in his sleep in 1918, at the age of 78. Winnie held his hand as he passed, whispering her love and gratitude for every moment they had shared. She followed him 2 years later, at 74, in the same bed in the same house he had built for her. Their children and grandchildren surrounded her, and her last words were from one of the books Nathan had brought her in those early days. "I have been bent and broken, but I hope into a better shape." They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking their house under the ponderosa pines, with headstones that listed their names and years but said nothing of what they had meant to each other. That story lived on in their children and grandchildren, in the books that still filled the library, and in the old oil lamp that Lily kept as a treasured family heirloom. And sometimes, on certain evenings when the light was right, people passing the old house swore they could see 2 figures sitting on the porch, close together, reading by lamplight, their love a beacon that even death could not extinguish.